Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another new episode of Lesser Known History. And today we will be continuing our series on the Renaissance, and we will be talking about the second half of the Northern Renaissances. So, the German Renaissance occurred within the areas of the Holy Roman Empire, and so some of the most important things that came out of that were the printing press. That is Johannes Gutenberg, and the printing press, as we all know, is what allowed for the really quick dissemination of knowledge through books and newspapers. Those are just some of the two easiest ways of looking at it. And the German Renaissance also gave us woodworking and a new type of painting called oil paints. And so where in the past paints dried out really quickly, the oil paints did not dry out very fast. They could be left out in the open for a while, and it allowed the artist to create their more realistic image. And since it took a while to dry, they could actually go back onto a canvas and readjust their painting, like remove paint or put different types of paint on it. So it's really cool when you really think about it, and oil paints are still around today. And so when we talk about Johannes Gutenberg and the printing press, of course, bookmaking, but the Protestant Reformation, and that ties in to humanism, right? Martin Luther and the questioning of the Catholic Church. So ironically, the funding of the arts by the Catholic Church in Italy and in those mercantile republics, as they moved on up, right, they disseminated and diffused up northward into Germany, the ability to disseminate new ideas through this funding and through the creation of these books is what allowed for the downfall of the church in that area. So the Protestant Reformation ends up starting out here. Albrecht Durer, he is the important artist that we are going to be talking about from the German Renaissance. So a little bit about him. He was born in 1471 in the city of Nuremberg, famous for the Nuremberg trials that happened after World War II. Skilled painter and printmaker. And so he traveled to Italy and became good friends with many of the Italian painters, including Raphael and Leonardo da Vinci. And being friends with all these Italian painters and artists, their ideas started to spread to him. So the ideas and techniques he learned about in Italy were disseminated and written down and helped to spur on the Northern Renaissance. So he wrote these ideas down, he practiced them, and formed these books that he was able to publish via the Gutenberg press, and that helped to disseminate all the knowledge that he gained up there. And so he is one of the fathers of the German Renaissance, and he wrote really important books on proportions and other artistic ideas that we still use today. So I'll show you one of his important pieces of art. This is one of my favorite pieces of artwork from this time. This is the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse. It is a pretty awesome piece of art. You can kind of see some of his techniques in there and proportion. It's very detailed. And so, yeah, there you go. That's the German Renaissance. We're going to keep on going. So we're going to talk about the two smaller sub-renaissances that happened. Not really going to focus too much on the important people of it, but I'll talk a little bit about what each of them did. So we have the English Renaissance, and then we're going to cover the Polish Renaissance. So really quickly, what was the English Renaissance? So it differed from the other Renaissances at the time. It focused on literature, performance arts, and architecture rather than painting and sculpting. I mean, there was, of course, some of that. But whereas these other Renaissances occurred all over these regions, the English Renaissance was really focused in London. As we all know, it's because London was such a massive cultural hub. But it focused on other things. Specifically, we're going to look at literature and the performing arts. As for the performing arts, England created what was called a madrigal, a different type of singing. And they were influenced by Italian practices at the time. It came to London, and they started to really work on that. And that would have, long time down the road, that would lead to English operas being made. But that's not really in the scope of the Renaissance, as much as that's just a really cool tidbit. And then architecture, there was a bunch of old buildings that were built on there. The Globe Theater, for instance, the original Globe, not the one that burned down. And so, yeah, that's the English Renaissance. It's pretty self-contained, not very expansive, but it did give us some pretty cool things. Finally, we have the Polish Renaissance. So this, out of all of the different parts of the Renaissance, was the least known, and I thought it was really interesting. So the Polish Renaissance happened, of course, in the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. It's centered around architecture and art. So a lot of this architecture happened to have been destroyed and burned down during the World Wars and different wars during that time. There aren't many remaining pieces of that, but you can still see some refurbished and remade pieces of artwork. So it happened in 3 waves. All right, so the first wave happened pretty early on in terms of the Renaissance, like in the late 1400s, early 1500s. It was caused by Italians that were invited to the nation. So the head of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, the government, hears about all these really cool pieces of art being made in Italy and the architecture. And so they invite a bunch of Italian artists, and they're like, come on up here and show us how to do this. So the first wave occurs when they go up there, they teach them all, and that's starting buildings. One of the best places to see this or learn about is in Gdansk, so out in East Poland, or at the time, now it's more central West Poland, but at the time, more Eastern Poland. And so that was where the first waves happened, in Eastern Poland. Then the second wave happens like mid-1500s, and that's more homegrown. This is the largest, most expansive part of the Polish Renaissance. This is when more homegrown artists rise on up and do really cool architectural projects kind of in Pomerania, back when it was part of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. And so these were more Polish influence, so Polish versions of Italian work. And then the third wave was very short, and it coincided with the Counter-Reformation, and it was just a little bit more the same, but this was more in central, western Poland. And so, again, very short, happened with the Counter-Reformation, so this is right near the end of the Renaissance. But 2 of the pictures I have here, you have a really cool piece of Polish art. And you can kind of see the influences of the Italian art, but also some of the oil paints that were used that they got from Germany. It's really, really cool. It's a really cool fusion of those 2 different styles of art. And then off to the east, that's Nicholas Copernicus' famous treatise on the revolutions, as it was called. And so Copernicus was half German, half Polish, but his writings happened during the Renaissance. So that's just a really cool piece of knowledge right there. And so, yeah, guys, that was the second half of the Northern Renaissances. I know there was that one massive German one, and then we had the 2 smaller English and Polish Renaissances. But if you enjoyed this video of lesser known history, hit that like button and subscribe, and I will see you all in the next video. Have a great day.